Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming to the Warrant Committee. For those of you at home, we have a very full gallery tonight, which is fun to see. We don't always get that. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Lee Michael McLean, and this is the Warrant Committee. We have some nameplates here. We have a really full agenda this evening, but we're going to go a little bit out of order of how things are presented. We don't have any minutes to approve from Monday yet, so we're going to start off with a discussion with the Playground Planners 2.0, and then we will jump to our next set of guests who are from Blue Hills Regional, and then we'll go back up to the top of the list again, and we'll be joined by the Planning Board just after 8 o'clock. And we'll start going through those articles. Any questions? And just for clarification purposes, Richard Bowler's on the phone. He's on speakerphone, and he will be here in person in 5 or 10 minutes. So folks on camera will see him join us and hang up the phone at that time. Great. So then, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. My name's Kelly Ballastracci.
Hi, Kelly.
I'm a nurse anesthetist, a mother of 3, and I'm a board member of the Milton Playground Planners.
My name's Sarah Mabel Skillen. I likewise am a board member, and my husband and I own the Ice Cream Smith in Dorchester. I have 2 young girls.
Great.
And I'm Carolyn McKay. I'm also a board member. I am a freelance food writer, and I have 3 children.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming in. This is a citizen's petition that we're discussing tonight, and I'll throw it up on the screen. And I took the liberty of creating something that looks a little like a citizen's petition so that we would have something that we could vote on. But the playground planners are here to talk to us about funding. And I think I described to you early on when we were talking that a lot of our discussion would come down to whether or not we were going to have an override this year or not going to have an override this year. And that would change dramatically how much funding was available. We did vote earlier this week to not have an override this current year, so that adjusts the landscape somewhat considerably. But there are still some funds out there. I know you've been talking with the parks, so we wanted to have you in and chat with you and see what direction you're going in. I've noticed a lot of chatter on Facebook, and it seems like you folks are incredibly smart about fundraising, and you've had some great ideas, and you have a lot of momentum, so I'm really excited about it. So you want to give us a little overview?
Thank you. Sure.
Yes, we wanted to start with a little brief history. So Sarah posted on Facebook, on Milton Neighbors, at the end of last summer, questioning the state of our playgrounds. By the end of that day, we had over 200 responses in support of doing something about it. The 3 of us organized, and we applied for our 501c3 status in October, which was just 2 short months later. We officially heard back that we were a nonprofit organization and in January, and launched our campaign on January 26th with the mission of enhancing the community spaces and public facilities of the great town of Milton. We know that parks and playgrounds are essential to community building. They're places where neighbors gather, parents can connect, kids make friends, and the bonds of community are strengthened. Prior to going to elementary school, it's where children can develop their healthy skills, socially, motor, and cognitive-wise. Everything is enhanced by play, and they can do this at our playgrounds. Our primary objective is to remove and rebuild the equipment and surrounding grounds of our 4 existing town-owned playgrounds located at Andrews Park, Kelly Field, Mary C. Lane Park, and Shields Park. These playgrounds are decades old, and we feel it's imperative that they are not only modernized, but enhanced with educational features. And we also want to ensure the safety and accessibility to all children and families, including those with physical limitations. Our goal, our fundraising goal to achieve this is $750,000.
So knowing what you told us about the decision not to have an override, we modified our request as well. And at this point want to kind of just request a broad commitment of support, I guess, to be determined. But there are several options for how that could be realized, and we can discuss that further, but I just want to stress that in every aspect in which we've discussed this with people, be it just around town or in fundraising situations, everyone universally wants to know what role the town is going to play and what kind of support is going to be coming from the town. And I think it's essential for people who are going to invest in this project to know that that commitment is strong, so that, you know, they understand that there is a buy-in and support from the town, given that this is town property, and these are, you know, town-owned facilities. So we had initially thought that we would request the funding needed for the poured-in-place rubber surfacing of our kind of phase 1 playgrounds that we plan to do. This is the state-of-the-art surfacing that is in most new playgrounds nowadays, and it's required for ADA compliance. And it's maintenance-free. It saves the funds that are needed to refill the wood fiber surfacing that's in the playgrounds that we have now. That has an annual maintenance cost, and the poured-in-place rubber lasts indefinitely and it has no maintenance. But we know also there will be an array of kind of ancillary costs associated with a construction project of this size and scope that in other towns, the Parks and Recreation Department and the DPW work together to implement and cover. So that's an alternative direction that
Great.
funds could go toward.
You have no prepared comments?
I have no prepared comments.
How embarrassing.
I know.
I want to just point out that we did speak with several other neighboring towns regarding what they have done with their playgrounds. And that's on the second page of this packet: Dedham, Braintree, Westwood, and Norwood.
Great.
All of those are similar towns, you know, varying in size, but they each have done their own overhaul of all of their playgrounds. Most of them have done this over 10 or more years. But they have the information that they gave us are budgets and numbers that are very much in line with the estimates that we have received, with the exception of the fact that they all have bigger budgets annually for playground maintenance than Milton does currently. But they have all said that working with their DPW was an integral component to having the upgrades be successful. They all did fundraising, applied for grants, had community builds for installation in some of the
What would
places.
have been that cost that you would have asked for that phase 1 rubber surfacing?
$100,000.
Okay. And have you done any studies or analysis of what kind of increased maintenance costs would be required on an ongoing basis if you were to replace the 4 playgrounds to your current plan?
There would be minimal maintenance in the immediate years following, and right now the town spends approximately $2,500 a year on playground maintenance. The bulk of that is replacing the wood chips, and by using the poured in place, we would no longer have to do that.
Okay.
So,
That's essentially what we heard from the Parks Department. Darnell, I'll get you 1 second. We had them in a couple of weeks ago, and we had a very long conversation with them about your efforts and encouraged them to coordinate with you and make sure that they were working towards a common goal with you. So I'm glad to hear that, that you had a similar answer there. They did say that they felt like there would be very little maintenance costs, like you said, because everything would be new, but that they figured that since they already did have a little bit in their budget, that they probably would be able to manage with what they had for a while. They might need a little bit of a bump later. So their perspective was that they would be able to maintain this equipment. We asked them very pointedly, would you be able to maintain the equipment if this committee worked so hard and put it in to make sure that it stayed to the standard that it was installed? And they said yes, they thought that they would. maybe there'd be a little bit of funding necessary. But at least they felt positive about that. And then one other thing that I would say is that this committee has long had a commitment to proactively protecting the assets of the town. And we talk all of the time about the age of the schools and the age of the DPW facilities and whatnot, and the playgrounds have come up over time. And so I definitely appreciate your efforts and want you to know that you have a lot of like-minded people at the table who are thinking about the age of structures and replacing them and making sure that we put something good in for our community. So, Darnell, do you have something?
Yes, actually, I see you had the 700. Do y'all have a maturing date for your committee, or is this something that y'all be doing fundraising to put towards additional projects going forward upon this? And the reason that is because continual maintenance is always going to be sacrificed in tough budget situations and tough times. And if this is something that you're looking at, what would be your plans going forward? I know rubber surfaces say, oh, they're going to last forever, meaning 10 years, before the rain and weather and everything else gets to them, kids riding bikes or whatever across it, needing to get the repairs and stuff on it. So are you looking, what is the long-term
We don't
picture
have a
after we put this together? That's
Sure.
my question.
I don't think we have a plan to, dissolve our organization after the playgrounds have been installed. We have talked about, we had a yard sale that raised almost $5,000, and we've talked that could be an annual or a biannual event, and that money could go towards playground maintenance, forever.
Continue.
Our hope was that we would raise enough to gift the town a sort of endowed fund that would cover maintenance costs for the long term. I know that there's no accumulation of funds in an annual budget, but that had been our goal. It will remain to be seen, of course, if we were able to do that, but
There are some budgets, the parks is one, I think, where they can accept gifts and have it benefit a specific thing. So there is a
Yes.
mechanism there for
Yes,
that. But
we
you're
did
right
ask about
about
that.
not being able to sort of squirrel money
Yeah.
away to save stuff or
yes.
something. Yep.
And we kept the mission of the organization very vague for that purpose. We enhance the community space, which is pretty all-encompassing, knowing that this is a short-term project, and once it's complete, inevitably, our eyes will have been open to an array of other needs that exist, and if we want to continue, or, the organization can evolve beyond us, and invite other projects down the road.
Steve.
Sure. And your discussions with the parks, you may have covered this already, but it's probably not the maintenance cost that's going to be a problem. It's going to be vandalism cost. I helped build the Andrews Park one 20 years ago, and, the same sweet little kids in the swings when we're 3 are a little harder on the stuff when they get older, and, that's where a big problem can come when, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars at one given time worth of damage occurs to the equipment. And, in as much as you can get a commitment from the from the Parks Department to maintain the stuff, I just don't know where the coverage would be for that, and it's not something the town has insurance for. But that could be, a good target for, some additional reserves to safeguard against that, because, you hope it won't happen, but practically speaking, it's likely.
So I know that you have been in touch with the Parks Department, and are you aware that the Parks Department put in a capital request for playground enhancements? This committee is going to take up the capital budget request on Monday, and so we'll probably be voting on it at that time. But there's currently $125,000 requested through the Parks Department. And if I were to look into my crystal ball, I would say it seems like we're going to be able to fund the capital requests that came in. Of course, the vote hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen on Monday. But the Parks Department did let us know that the intention for that $125,000 is for playground upgrades, and that they're very willing to work with you folks to try to collaborate efforts and make sure that they're supporting you and you're working together.
Great.
So something, but
Yeah.
not $750,000.
That's great.
And we'll make that vote on Monday. Betty?
I just had a point that I wanted to ask the capital committee. Who's on the capital committee? You are? All right. If the park department capital request gets approved for playgrounds, how does that money get held in a fund or reserve so that in fact those funds go to the playground initiative or the town's part of that versus going into the parks general funds and getting spent in another way?
In part, that depends on whether it's from borrowed funds, from raised funds raised by selling of town bonds. So if that's the case, then that money wouldn't exist except in bookkeeping until the bonds were sold.
I did ask this question, and I got the answer.
Okay.
This is borrowed money.
Okay.
And so it would only be bonded when the plan to make a purchase of playground equipment came to be, and there's no expiration date on the town meeting voting yes on it. So unless a future town meeting were to rescind the vote, this would be out there as an eligible bond when it came time for the money to be spent, whenever the fundraising efforts caught up to it. And so there's no annual sort of worry there about that money having to be spent within the next fiscal year or whatever. So it can sit out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's really helpful to know. Good.
Anything else? Well, we don't really vote on ceremonial things, but I will tell you that I think that you have our support and that we really appreciate community effort here. We're all volunteers. We put in tons of hours so we understand what it's like to give to the town, and we really thank you for all your creative ideas and your dedication. And I can't wait for my son to use one of your new playgrounds, and I look forward to helping out myself with your efforts in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Our next topic is going to be Blue Hills, if those folks want to join us here at the table.
You ready? Okay. Yes, sir. We have copies of our materials if anybody would need them.
I have stuff to put on the screen, but if you want to pass out hard copies, that would be
Glad
great.
to pass
Mr.
those.
McLean,
Yes, sir.
members of the Warrant Committee, I'd like to introduce Steve
More.
Moore, who's assistant to the,
Assistant Superintendent for Business
Yeah.
and Personnel.
and he's going to present tonight. The superintendent had an operation on his leg, so he can't get around.
Okay.
Normally he comes, all right?
All right.
Again, my name is Festus Joyce. I'm the representative for the town of Milton at the Blue
think it's
Hills
pretty much the
Regional School. All
Thank you
right?
so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure thing. We were happy to see that our assessment went down a little bit this year.
Well, I'd like to tell you we had a great deal to do with that, but we do pay attention to that. Again, thank you for having us. I'm
Sure.
glad that your committee member, Mr. Joyce, could be here with us. And again, the superintendent is recovering from multiple foot surgery, so he won't be here. I'm going to keep it brief. We're going to talk about three things here. I'm going to talk about our budget, the operating budget for next year, a little bit about a potential MSBA project, and then we will talk about the assessment going forward. And really, I'm just going to kind of plow through this blue book. So
Okay.
if you want to follow along, kind of just starts with the letter. Blue Hills, when we put together a budget, we look at three things. Two of them are listed in the book. Is the budget responsible? Is it realistic? And is it relevant? And by responsible, we mean, does it meet the needs of the students that are attending the school? Does it meet the needs of the staff so they can teach the students? Are we being responsible to our stakeholders? Realistic in the sense that, are we asking for money that our member towns can afford to fund us at a level? We don't want to put together a budget that can't be funded. And unlike many town departments, we really get one crack to come at you and say, this is our budget. So the superintendent was very conscientious, wanted to make sure our overall budget was less than 3%, because that would yield assessments that we thought were manageable for the districts. And then lastly, the third R is relevant. Does it all fit together in the times that we are working in, and will it advance the mission, the goals, and everything else of the school as we go forward? If the superintendent were here tonight, he'd tell you that the budget's built on 4 strategic goals. They're on page 3, program improvement, student achievement, literacy, and technology implementation and integration, and you can read about those. I won't go into it. On page 4, we talk a little bit about the budget, and you can see that the overall budget was a 2.9% increase. The salary budget overall was a 2.7% increase. I'd like to call attention to the fact that out of the 3 of the 4 major areas in salaries, there was a decrease in the budget. When you go through this budget, you'll see a number of decreases. We had to make some tough decisions, but no programs or services to students were sacrificed. We're not cutting anything that serves our students. We've rearranged some things, but we're not reducing the level of services, even though we've reduced funding for some lines. Page 5 and 6 really talk about the core fundamentals, the needs that we're addressing through the budget. The first one is that we're adding a social studies teacher. It seems kind of odd that you add a social studies teacher when MCAST is math, science, and English language arts. Social studies were our largest classes, so the principal knew that she had to decrease class size in social studies. But also by adding a social studies teacher, we were able to now have the social studies teachers, because we were going to reduce their class sizes, but there would be some additional class time remaining. They would be able to pick up some electives and teach some elective courses that currently the math, science, and English teachers are teaching. So we'd be shifting the offering of elective courses to the social studies teachers instead of the math, science, and English teachers, thereby allowing them to have more sections of core classes and reduce their class size, particularly at the 10th grade level where the MCAS is important. So by adding a social studies teacher, we created the greatest amount of leverage in reducing our class size. We could have added an English teacher, but it wouldn't have had the same impact across all of the disciplines that the social studies teacher had. 21st century learning materials are a core piece of this budget. Common Core is requiring us to update some of our academic programs, industry changes, and just time between we've replaced the texts and instructional materials in our vocational programs. It's come time to change some of those. We're also continuing with our technology integration. As you may or may not know, each student that attends Blue Hills gets a Chromebook. A Chromebook is somewhere between a tablet and a laptop. It's a glorified tablet with a keyboard. Every student gets that, and it's used throughout the day by both staff and students. They're able to communicate with the teacher. They're able to access online resources. It's proven to be a wonderful tool. What it's also done is increase the demand on the school's infrastructure. We have to add more wireless access points. We have to add more switches. As we access more online resources, streaming and all of that, you know what it does to your capacity of your network. So we're beefing that up. So you're going to see some money in the budget for that. You're also going to see some money in the budget to replace the first series of Chromebooks. Our seniors that are graduating this year will be the first class that had them. They're going away. Their Chromebooks are 3 years old. We are not going to give them to the freshmen. We will figure out how to retire those in a graceful manner. The freshmen will be getting new ones. So you'll see money for technology, and that will probably stay as we move forward throughout the years. We've also made some operational changes, reduced some salaries in a number of areas. One of the things that we are very cognizant of doing is not cutting things that we know we'll need. We won't cut teacher salaries when we're putting together the budget, but we might cut the amount allocated for coaches or substitute teachers, because those are variable items. Those are might need dollars as opposed to known need dollars. If we need more money where we cut for something that we might have needed, we're gonna have to find it, but we're not making the reductions where we know we need the money. And then I'll talk about capital planning as we get to that portion of the budget. I'll quickly go through all of the categories in the budget. I'd be glad to take questions at any time, whatever the chair wishes to do. On page 8 is our 1,000 series salary. That's primarily administration. It's a 4.4% cut. The majority of that comes from the reduction of staff in the business office. We're getting rid of an assistant. We're putting in a purchasing clerk. This person would be part-time, and they'll be working directly with the teachers. Our vocational teachers spend a great deal of time purchasing materials and equipment for their programs. If we assign a purchasing clerk to work with them, we should be able to obtain better value, but more importantly, take away that time that they're spending doing the purchasing and the research and allow them to spend time with students. So we see it as a win for our students, and that's something we can do in the business office. The 2000 series salary, there's a couple of items here of note. The 2305, this is on page 9. The classroom teachers, those are salaries for classroom teachers. That is steps, lanes, and everyone in the district is getting a 2% salary increase, budgeted salary increase for next year. That's what all of our collective bargaining agreements are at, and those people that don't have them. So you'll see that. The 2330 line, where you see an increase of 51,000, is an accounting adjustment. We used to keep the paraprofessionals or the teaching assistants in the teaching salary line. The Department of Education really wants those broken out. And what happened over time is now the department collects all of its information from us electronically. We report how many teachers we have through a separate piece of software, how many dollars we spent through another piece, and they disaggregate it and they calculate things like average teacher salary. So if we report paraprofessional salaries in there, the state won't count the paraprofessionals' bodies. So when they calculate average salary, the teacher salaries will be inflated because there's fewer teachers and more salaries. And plus, we're not really managing it if we keep them all jumbled together. So that's an item that's broken out there. Guidance, we had some staff exchanges during this fiscal year, and we're able to hire a half a guidance counselor. We'd originally budgeted for a half a PE teacher as part of our increase. After we'd finished our hiring process, we noticed we had enough money to fill a guidance need. Well, lo and behold, we actually found someone that would do half-time PE and half-time guidance, and we created a job for that person, and it worked out great, and they were able to be with us full-time. And all the other changes are really just some savings, salary exchanges or whatever. The reduction in substitutes is that might need money that I spoke of. The 3000 series are student services, attendance services, athletics, clubs and activities. Athletics, there's a $14,000 reduction. Again, coaching assignments are might need money, not will need money, so we made some reductions there. And in the 4000 series for custodians, we had a number of retirements this year and anticipate a number of retirements next year. So all of our custodians will be getting their 2% raise and their steps and lanes, but we had enough people leave that we're able to take those folks on step 9 and replace them with folks on step 1, and we're capturing those savings and moving forward. So again, that all adds up to about a 2.7% increase in salaries overall. On the expense side, as we move to page 12, for the administrative 1000 series, it's a 1.1% increase. And that's directly related to the costs of memberships, all the organizations that we belong to, and contracted services that we use in the district, not only us, but the district school committee, things like auditing services and sort of stuff like that, legal services. So that's a small change there of $3,800. In the 2000 series, this is the second largest area of increase in the expense budget, $97,000, or 16% increase. This is really all going to teachers and students. The 2250 line, the increase of $10,000 for building technology, those are the switches and wireless points that I talked about. And if you scroll down a little further to 2451, there's $36,430. That's the Chromebook replacement that will be in there. Moving back up to the top, the 2357, the professional development stipends. These are not payments to teachers. The district is contracting with a consultant who has worked with a number of vocational districts in Massachusetts and across the country in developing 21st century vocational programs. And it really goes to the point of who are the right students for vocational programs, attracting the right students for vocational programs, retaining them. So the students that we take get into the programs that they should be in and graduate after 4 years rather than potentially returning back to their district because they were unsatisfied. They'll be working with the administrators and the teachers on that. The 2410 line is an increase in textbooks and materials, primarily for history, math, criminal justice, culinary arts, metal fabrication. The 2415 are those non-text materials. Common Core requires more than just a simple textbook for each classroom. You need to have multiple sources for students to learn. So that's the electronic resources primarily that we'll be accessing through the Chromebooks. The 2420 line is instructional equipment. This is the equipment that's primarily used in the vocational programs. A lot of it is the big equipment, whether it's printers or welding equipment or automotive equipment. We're not making any reductions. We're just moving that expense into our Perkins grant. We get a grant from the federal government through the state of Massachusetts for vocational education. Some of that previously was used for salaries. We're stopping doing that, and we're buying equipment out of that grant. So that is something that I think you'll see continue as we move forward, using that grant more for things than people. Because if grant dollars go up and down, it's hard to make changes with people and not impact the budget, but things we can live with. And lastly, the 2720 account is the Scholastic Math and Scholastic Reading inventories. Those are the assessments that we give to every incoming freshman. We have very little history with our students as they come into the high school, other than their application packet, which includes some attendance and discipline and recommendations from teachers, and their MCAS scores. So everybody goes through an assessment process so we can see where they are and what kind of services we need to provide them, what their strengths and weaknesses are. It's just another tool for determining where we go with education for those students. The 3000 series, the biggest cut there is in the transportation line. We run 17 buses a day that transport our students to and from school, and then we run a number of late runs to provide athletic or detention runs so those students can get home. Last year when we built the budget, we did not have a bus contract in place. So we had to estimate what it was going to cost us for transportation services for last year. We overstated it a little bit, and now we're making the reduction in this budget to bring us back into line with what the contract actually cost. Next year, that line should go up about 2%.
Excuse me, any benefit accruing to you for the drop in fuel prices?
We do have an escalation clause. I have not seen, it's not a lot of money, but it will give us something back, yes. I haven't done the calculation. It'd be a couple $1,000s. The 4000 series is our maintenance of facilities. Again, this was kept pretty much level funded. The two changes that you see, the decrease of 25,000 and the increase of 20,000, are more of an accounting correction. We did not have a way to report contracted services when they were performed on our grounds. They would always be charged to building contracted services. So we've added an account and moved some money appropriately there. Probably the largest increase is in the 5000 series, which are our employee benefits. We are a GIC group. I don't know if Milton belongs to GIC. We budgeted roughly 7% increases in our health insurance programs, both for active and retired teachers. GIC came in a little over 3%, with the exception of the Harvard Pilgrim program, which was closer to 9% increase. Unfortunately, most of our employees were enrolled in the Harvard Pilgrim, so we're not seeing any savings there from our budgeting. But we were aggressive in areas like unemployment, workers' compensation, costs, so we shaved those down a little bit to help mitigate the increase. We may be able to be more aggressive in our budgeting next year for health insurance if we end up with some wiggle room, but it's very difficult to project that. And then lastly, capital expense. There's a $600,000 proposed for building improvements, and that's a $50,000 decrease. And we had to put back into the budget $85,000 to pay for the last payment of our energy service contract with Siemens. Moving forward, when it comes to capital expense, the district is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. So 50 years ago, we had our first graduating class we did then. For the past couple of years, the superintendent has been applying to the MSBA for repair programs for the school. We have a building that was built in the 60s. Most of our walls are glass, single pane glass, and steel with heating units built right in. Very inefficient, very drafty. If you came and visited the school, you would know how drafty it is. For the past 3 years, the superintendent was told, you just missed. You know, we were going to fund you, but you were one away. MSBA has always said that buildings should have a useful life of 50 years. We hit 50 years. Lo and behold, we've been told that we'll be accepted into the core program for a project at the school. What that means to us right now is that we have to fund, most likely, the feasibility and design portion. And we will have to do that sometime in the next 6 months. We are on MSBA's timeline. We will not be able to get back to any districts in time for town meetings to give you numbers as to what that's going to cost. We are going to come to you at some point and tell you what we need to add to our budget to do it. It's the district's intention for the feasibility study and design, which could cost in excess of $1 million, is to use what remaining excess and deficiency funds we have in the district right now to pay for that. For those that don't know what excess and deficiency funds are, it's sort of the free cash for regional districts. We're allowed to retain 5% in dollars beyond our operating budget. So we have an operating budget of $18 million. At the end of the year, if we have 5% in cash left over, we can carry that from year to year. And Blue Hills has carried roughly $900,000 from year to year. Anything over that gets returned to the towns in terms of excess E&D, it's called. And last year we returned about 350. This year it's 312. So there will be no increased assessment to our member communities for the cost of the feasibility study and design. But you are going to have to vote, and you can either hold a town meeting to vote, or you can take no action, and that allows us to move the money. Moving forward, should we decide to build something...
Sorry, how soon would you need action on from a town meeting on that?
It's probably not going to happen when you have a town meeting. Most communities, I think, are just going to let it pass.
Okay.
You know, not take any action. It's not worth it, because we're not asking you for any money, other than we do have to come to you if we're going to increase our budget. But
you're
we're
looking
increasing
for,
it with money we already have.
You're looking for permission to spend the money that you have.
We're looking for permission to appropriate from ourselves the money to do
And
that.
sounds like there's a mechanism there where if we take no action, you get to spend it.
We get to increase the budget.
We
yes.
do have an October town
Then
meeting as well.
it may, again, you know, the MSBA sets these deadlines. You have to do it. They say you got 90 days to do this, and
Okay.
well, we do it through through whatever it says. We don't really get any control.
Okay.
The school is looking at a roughly 52 to 54% reimbursement rate. So if we do a $20 million project or a $30 million project, this $650,000 that's built into the budget already would go a great way towards paying that bond. So the initial increase to any community because of our project, we think would be overall to our budget a couple $100,000 maybe in the first year, and then it would just roll forward. So there will not be a significant impact on the communities. And we know that if we add money to capital projects, we're going to not be able to ask for money for other things. So we're going to have to keep it reasonable. The plan only really calls for, our intention is only really to renovate the school. We don't need to build a new school. We don't need to build additions. We don't have any land to do any of that. We're going to need to replace all of the window walls, the heating, the ventilating, life safety systems, and as soon as you do that much work, ADA kicks in, all of the other building codes, so we're going to have to bring the whole building up to compliance. And we don't really know what that's going to cost and what the impact's going to be. It's probably 2+ years away.
So you had a board meeting last night, I think, right?
Yes.
And you had sent us preliminary fee figures for fiscal year 17. Did those end up holding up? Were there any
Yes.
changes to them? No?
Yeah, so if you know, just the one sheet that I have is a great way to look at the assessment. Your assessment is decreasing $2,198.
So no change from what you had emailed
No
before?
change from what we had emailed you. If it is going to change, what we believe we've done is put forward the worst-case scenario,
Okay.
the highest possible assessment. Last year, we were able to reduce it a little bit to all the
Yep.
communities. You
And
know,
it's-
we're using the governor's January 30th numbers.
So are we.
Yeah, and we all do. And then,
So it sounds like you're expecting some money might be spent during fiscal year 17 on this building project, but there wouldn't be any impact to the town in fiscal year 17?
there'd be no impact in 17, or, you're right, there would be no impact in
So the
17.
earliest that there would be an increased financial impact would probably be fiscal year 18?
That would be a pretty aggressive schedule.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, probably be 19.
Okay. Steve had a question.
Yeah, it was along the same lines, was once you incur the debt, and then you've got a year, or 6 months or a year before you have to start paying those bonds, can you send to the communities a projection of what that's gonna do, so that as we're looking at, you know, the growth in these budgets over the years, that we can see, you know, if all of a sudden that debt service is gonna go up and your maintenance costs will go down for a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, we're going to have to come to you to get approval to bond.
Right.
So, and my guess is you're not going to give us the approval till you see that.
Okay.
So, yes, you will get that.
So at that time, but not before?
At that time, yeah, we will do that. We will do some serious projecting on those things and what it will do to the budget. I mean, I think a 2 to 3% increase in our budget is the direction that this superintendent is going. One of the things we've tried to do also slowly is reduce that returned E&D, because we're taking money from you and giving it back a year later
Right.
that you could have spent. It
So-
doesn't make sense
so
to
in
me.
the-
The first year, it'll all go away.
Right, what you said, there's a $600,000 typical capital line item in here. Will you continue to need that, or will just about everything be addressed by the building renovation, so that that will drop off but be available to pay debt service?
The superintendent has been floating a number of about maybe keeping $150,000 in the capital line to address ongoing issues during this, because it's a 20-year
Right.
period. You know, year one, we may not need anything, but down the road.
I want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, but I'm wondering if you could spend 2 minutes on the comparison pages in the back of this book on
Sure.
how Blue Hills school achievement compares to the district and state.
Sure. We're a level 2 school, and all of our districts are level 2 districts, because somewhere you have a level 2 school, whether it's an elementary, middle, or high school. In English language arts, 98% of our students are proficient. Mathematics, 80%. And in science, 82%. We were a level 1 school. We took a dip. In order to get back to level 1, we need to have 2 years of sufficient progress. If you look at the area over here on the left, it tells us where we didn't meet our target, and those are the areas. And they were really in subgroups. High-need students, we didn't meet our target, and economically disadvantaged students, and students with disabilities. So in the typically difficult subgroups, we did not meet our growth targets. The district is growing slightly below student achievement levels are growing at slightly below 50%. But when you have 98% proficiency, growth is not something that you're going to see a lot of. Where do you grow from there? Because we only test once. We don't have 6 or 7 years worth of MCAS like you would in a municipal district. We have one, so it's our sophomores and it's the growth from year to year. And the other things are the graduation rate and attendance rate. The graduation rate for the past 5 years is 98.9. Those are students that complete the program and graduate or don't drop out. And the attendance rate is 94.5. We are achieving as well as the best performing high schools in the communities that we serve.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Jean?
In your targets that you did not meet, did you meet them previously? In the disadvantaged, economically
I
disadvantaged?
believe the year they made number, I've only been there for 2 years, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think in order to be a level 1 school, you had to meet those. We're seeing an increase in that particular type of student also, so that's making it more challenging. I think we're all seeing an increase in that type of student. So I know that we have 1 year of sufficient growth. If we do it again, we'll be back to level 1.
I think you're going to be taking care of about 51 of our students next year, is that right?
The enrollment is, it's based on this year, so your assessment's based on this year's dollars, so there's 51.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 51. In the past 7 years, your enrollment's increased 31%. Your budget's increased 30%. The chart at the very bottom is kind of interesting. We threw that together, that Milton ranks 7th among the 9 communities for applicants. So there's 2 districts that have fewer applicants. Yet Milton ranks 3rd on the number of applicants that are accepted. Yet it ranks 6th on the number that are accepted that actually attend. That was one of the interesting facts I uncovered in doing this, that just because you're accepted doesn't mean they necessarily attend. Most
Maybe they have
schools
another
have
option.
Yeah. And that's just the applicants is a ranked numbering, and the others are based on the percentages.
Well, it is a good opportunity for those 51 students, so I'm glad that they have that option and that they're able to get in. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned in the personnel moves that were made that you removed an assistant business manager and added a purchasing clerk.
Purchasing clerk,
Yeah.
part-time, yep.
So who's doing what the assistant business manager used to do?
I am. This has been, did a lot of the accounting work. So that shifted over to me and to, we have in our business office, we have myself, a payables clerk, a payroll clerk, and an HR secretary. And we do all the work. The area that I don't get to as much as I'd like to would be purchasing. It's just the real detail.
Yeah.
So,
So your duties have increased a lot this past year.
yes,
And you're coming to this meeting too. Thank you for your time.
not a problem.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to just say, we have to go to 9 towns, not, he goes to 9.
You can come.
I have Milton, I'm proud to be here. I've been in school for 30-something years. I was a teacher in the construction for many years, and I've been 14 years on the school committee. Since I retired, I come on the school committee. Let me tell you, I love this school. I love what it does to the kids that go to that school. I go down to the South Shore Plaza. You don't know how many kids that come up to, hey, Mr. Joyce, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. It's a wonderful place to work. It's a beautiful place to live. And believe me, these people who run the school, and I'm one of them now, they get their bang for the buck. You can see what he's delivered, less than last year. You don't see that too often in any kind of government. So I'd just like to thank, I know what you people do, a lot of work for thank you or pat on the back or a kick in the whatever, you know, but I'd just like to thank you for what you do. And I like I said, I've been 52 years in the town, so I've been around. I know I'm probably older than, I've been in town longer than all of you. But anyhow, I'd like to just thank you so much for what you do for the town of Milton. And I'm saying it for me, and I'm saying it for a lot of townspeople, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Really appreciate being in there.
Julia, can you help find where Bill is? I think he was supposed to be here at 7:15. Okay, it's time. I forgot to recognize something at the beginning of the meeting, which is that we're Tedless tonight. And I think that is... What? Yeah, I think it's noteworthy, which is what the part that some people might not know, because this is the first time that we're Tedless since March of 2013. So I hope he's enjoying his day off. Brian, you want to come join us at the table? We're going to move back up on the agenda and start talking about planning board. And we just texted Bill, so he should be joining us in a minute. This is Brian Furs, who is the chairperson of the planning board, and of course my husband. And tonight we were going to talk with Brian about a couple of bylaws that were proposed: the bed and breakfast tax, the non-conforming business use, and then I think we're going to talk with Bill mostly about the assisted living residents, and then we're going to talk about the planning board budget.
Excellent.
Anything else?
Looking forward to it.
All right, you want to start since
Sure,
you're here and Bill is not?
Where do you want me to start?
I think that the first one that's on the list is the bed and breakfast.
Okay. So bed and breakfast bylaw was put forward this year in an effort to, as you can see from the purpose, really just create an amenity in the town for residents, for the institutions, for the colleges. Milton Hospital was of mind, obviously Curry College and Milton Academy, among others. And it also had a secondary purpose of trying to help preserve some of the large estates in town. A couple of examples would be the Salt and Sol estate on Brush Hill Road, which is currently for sale. It has well over 12 bedrooms. They're having a hard time finding a buyer for that home as a private family, although certainly it could still happen. And there are other examples like that. Certainly the home that was just sold, that was renovated by the Falcone family over in the Hillside area, would have been a good candidate as well. Ultimately, the planning board, after spending not a whole lot of time on this, has decided that we'd like to ask the warrant committee to recommend that this come back to the planning board for further study. There's a few reasons for that. One is siting. We want to make sure that we're properly looking at where these bed and breakfasts could fall. Another is actually that we've had the opportunity to look at a few other bylaws in other communities, and our bylaws are by far the most restricted and regulated. So we want to make sure that we're not going beyond this where we should be in a general zoning bylaw for bed and breakfast use. We feel we probably should have some conversations with the Board of Health. But generally speaking, we think that the bylaws, it's getting there, but it needs a little bit more time, and a little bit more study, a little bit more conversation. One of the reasons that it is on the warrant is that we have, and you'll be hearing a similar comment from me shortly, is that the planning board has found it very difficult to get good feedback from town meeting members and the general public on any sort of zoning bylaw. We had 3 or 4 informational sessions on this bylaw and 5 others last summer. And we're going to bring some of those forward for October, but heard from the public that the summer is not a good time to discuss bylaws because people are away. We had a similar process, a bit less time in our zoning agendas due to a few big applications that were before us. But we did have several informational sessions on the general non-conforming bylaw, which you're going to see shortly. And again, we heard from the public that there was just not enough opportunity for the public to comment, and that and a lot of the comments we got were very general and a bit hard to discern exactly where the public felt. So our hope in putting some of these bylaws forward is that we can actually get some feedback from town meeting as to where they want the planning board to be spending their time on general zoning and how they believe the town should be generally zoned. We found it very difficult to find out from town meeting without a bylaw in front of them whether or not, for instance, they think a bed and breakfast bylaw would be advisable. So our hope in asking you to send this back for further study would be that it is sent back for further study and that we could hopefully be back in front of town meeting in October or at a future town meeting. But at this particular town meeting in May, that our members will take an opportunity to come forward and give us some general comments about whether they think a bed and breakfast bylaw is advisable and what some of the criteria that they might want to see would involve. So hopefully in submitting this bylaw, this is a good first step in giving the planning board some good direction and the town some good direction in figuring out exactly how we should be crafting our future planning endeavors here in light of our interpretation of the master plan. And so again, we ask for you to send it back to us for further study, but with the hope that town meeting members will still take the opportunity to give us some feedback before the vote is made.
Are there any warrant committee members who would be interested in recommending the bed and breakfast bylaw to town meeting, even though the planning board is recommending it get returned to the planning board? No? If not, I took the liberty of creating a recommendation, which is recommend that the town vote to refer the subject matter of this article to the planning board for further study, and I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Any discussion?
Quick question.
Yes, sir?
When you say you're having problems in getting that public input to these, so you're putting the zoning bylaw out there to try to drum up, isn't that saying that we have a bigger problem going on here? And are there any other ideas out there other than putting articles forward to get this interest going?
Well, certainly our efforts at having informational sessions has been an attempt to bring town meeting members forward prior to the actual town meetings to have these conversations. We're not seeing very many town meeting members. We're seeing residents. We're seeing town residents, but we're not seeing a lot of them. Town meeting members are ultimately the ones we need to educate and make sure that they're soliciting the input from their neighbors. I can't speak to the larger process. We are doing everything we can and asking for more ideas about how to communicate our efforts to the community. We're using Milton Neighbors, we're using Milton Times, we're using word of mouth, informational sessions. We've had recommendations that we post our meetings in storefronts, which we have to be a little careful about setting legal precedents and whatnot, but we're doing everything we can, and I certainly want to take a step back and let the Warrant Committee know that we are not treating this lightly. We brought this forward with every intent to move it to a vote in May. Unfortunately, what we've discovered is that the only time we get comments and feedback, despite all of those informational sessions, is after it's on the warrant. So it certainly has acted as a great catalyst for discussion, and hopefully this discussion will allow us to bring something forward next time that will be more in line with what we're hearing from the public, and hopefully will be more in line with what candidly the planning board can come to agreement on as well.
Darnell, I'll add one more thing to the list that Brian said, and that is the Assistant Town Planner, Tim Swazinski, is now keeping a list of citizens' emails who are interested in updates on planning activities, and he is sending out updates to let them know when you're having public meetings. And also they've utilized Susan's town meeting member list to blast out when they're having like the high school meeting and whatnot.
Yeah, and we also, Bill reminded me, we'll be announcing, Bill's taking away the thunder a little bit from the planning board announcing it, but we will be announcing that we'll be having a blog formulated very soon, probably maintained by planning board staff.
Great.
That will be letting us know about what's coming up and soliciting feedback. Obviously, email responses are requested, and comments are very much taken to heart. And I can attest to the number of hours that were spent in reading comments and incorporating them into the drafts. I can also testify to the many hours that were spent drafting the comments by planning board members and others. So we've been certainly working very hard on this spring. Or winter, excuse me. And then, of course, every meeting is televised, as you all share the pleasure of as well. And it's always surprising to see just how many people watch that when you walk through the Milton Market or something.
Steve, did you have something?
No, it's just, it is troubling to, put all the work into it, and then the real feedback happens on town meeting floor, where, it was the same thing with the Ice House, where the folks trying to do the Ice House proposal thought that they had done a lot of outreach until they found out that they hadn't done a lot of outreach. And, with technology and things, there's got to, I don't know if webinars or, having the televised hearing that's available through the town website so that it's on someone's own volition and at their own time that they could watch it and have some of the questions answered. Are inexpensive ways maybe to expand.
Yeah, I mean, there is a time, obviously, involvement, as this board knows. A lot of time goes into all of these initiatives, and we all are volunteers and have full-time jobs as well, and families and everything else. Not to shirk our responsibilities, but I do think it's important as a town meeting member, as the current chair of the planning board, and as a Milton resident to remind both town meeting members and Milton residents that staying informed requires a responsibility on their part as well. When I hear from people that they don't read the Milton Times and therefore they don't know what's going on, I have a fairly easy solution to that. Anyway, I certainly, we are going to do everything in our power to keep people involved, but to a certain extent, we need some action on the part of those wishing to be kept informed as well.
Richard?
I was just going to ask, I'm not a town meeting member, so I don't know this, but when you become a town meeting member, does the moderator tell the new members to go to these and watch out for these events?
There's no orientation that I know of.
There isn't. I thought there was kind of a swearing in and
That's it.
So maybe they
Takes
should.
20 seconds.
Maybe during that they should, because it's something that
They can hand out that article.
might be obvious to know that you should go to those things, but maybe it's not obvious.
Bill?
I actually think that we should take a minute and just inform the public that Milton Access films all of these meetings. We're being televised now. But at the same time, they keep it online. So if people are watching it and you don't want to sit there and watch 3 hours of a planning board meeting or 2 hours of a warrant committee meeting or 3.5 to 4 hours of a selectmen's meeting, you can take and hit pause. You can come back and watch it online. So you can go back. You have the ability at the same time that you don't have to listen to every single piece of that meeting. You can fast forward through. So maybe just giving the public a little commercial that Milton Access TV, just Google it. It works. Every one of their meetings that you see these microphones in front, they're all online.
Darnell, did you have one more thing?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
No, I was just upstairs to a meeting, and it was full. And the biggest complaint was, nobody knew until the last minute what was going on. And there was more anger about that than actually what was going to happen. So,
We hear it all the time, and therefore we're doing the best we can to provide methods of outreach. but we also have legal obligations about who we have to notify. And certainly from a precedent standpoint, with appeals and everything else that the planning board is facing, we have to be careful about notifying people that are not legally required to be notified in a certain way, because if we set a precedence and then we don't do that in the future, that could be a matter for an appeal. So it's a process we have to be very careful about. That said, there are certainly ways we can provide notice without doing it legally. Milton Neighbors, Milton Times, there are other ways to do it. So we will continue to research that, and we are very open to ideas of continuing of how to promote our activities.
So the recommendation before us is to refer the subject matter of the B&B article to the planning board for further study and further discussion. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Could we move to the tax issue?
The next one is the tax.
Great. So in this particular case, despite the bed and breakfast bylaw being put back or sent back to planning board for further study, or that being the recommendation, we'd actually like the warrant committee to recommend that this move forward. And there's a couple of, oh, I'm sorry, that's actually not what it says up there.
You don't have to pay attention.
Okay, thanks.
I'll move it down the page.
Planning board,
it's not there.
Planning board voted to send this to town meeting as written. While the bed and breakfast bylaw won't be moving forward, this would essentially allow Milton to impose a local sales tax upon a hotel use, much like it does with a restaurant use. And there are a couple of reasons why this should still move forward. One is the ongoing question about where Airbnb falls in the world of regulations, and that's a national problem, probably international problem in some ways, as far as figuring that out. If there's an opportunity to regulate and track Airbnb, this would potentially allow for the sales tax to be imposed on Airbnb transactions. And this is a very easy, not complicated way of the town to collect under mass law. The second reason, and this is something that frankly the planning board has not even really discussed, but there's been discussions with the building commissioner, and Mr. Prondak believes that there's interpretations of our bylaws that suggest that a bed and breakfast type use under 4 bedrooms could technically be allowed under a section of the bylaw, and I apologize, but I don't have that in front of me. So I guess the point is that there are certainly opportunities to apply this tax even if there's not a bed and breakfast bylaw in place, whether it's through an pre-existing non-conforming use, which I'm not necessarily aware of, certainly through Airbnb, and potentially through a use that comes in through another section of our bylaw. So for those reasons, we would ask that this bylaw be put forward for a town meeting vote with a favorable approval.
Questions? Yep, Steve.
Just, and maybe not for you so much as to direct to town council whether this article needs to be submitted by the Board of Selectmen. It's a revenue generating thing rather than, I get the idea of it, and where I come down on that will be for later, but it would be a shame to have it, second guessed the legality of a planning board making a recommendation. Like in the legislature, the House of Representatives puts forth budget recommendations, and if it doesn't work that way, so whether there's any kind of legal sequence that this would throw off by coming through from the planning board rather than from the Board of Selectmen.
I take it that hasn't come up yet?
That has not been raised. I don't have a comment on
I can ask John Flynn.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Can I ask the difference between a hotel tax and a sales tax?
This is called a sales and use tax. So it's Massachusetts has a sales and use tax, which allows you to charge a sales and use tax to a hotel or a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
That's this tax.
Okay.
Same thing.
How much is the tax?
It's variable, right? The town can charge whatever it wants up to the sales tax.
Right.
So it can charge up to 6.25%. It can charge as little as 0.5% or whatever.
Darnell?
How do you capture the air? Well, actually, bed and breakfast. Now they have these new Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you do a favor for folks listening so they know what we're talking about, what the differences are, and how we would go about capturing. For me, my question more how we would go about capturing that Airbnb tax like you were talking about, and how do you identify that in your neighborhood is one of the things. But if you can give descriptions a little bit about the different ones, because we throw a lot of terms out, and folks were like, well, what is it?
So I can't certainly give a comment on tax law.
Not tax law, but
So
but
I just want to clarify that I can't clarify tax
not
law.
tax law, but
and I don't know
just,
how we collect from Airbnb in its
That's
current
awesome.
form either. Essentially, what Airbnb is it's a website that allows or offers a system by which people can rent rooms in their homes. They can rent their home, they can rent a single room, they can rent their entire home, they can rent an apartment in their home. It can be on a bed and breakfast structure, it can be on just a sleep overnight structure. It's similar to vacation rental by owner website, but they call it Airbnb. And so certainly it begs the question in many municipalities about how do you regulate them and also how do you tax them. I don't think Milton has an answer to that, but certainly if Milton comes up with an answer to that, this bylaw would then allow us to collect that tax because we'd be ready for it. Bed and breakfasts are typically, I don't have a specific definition. This bylaw that we will resubmit to you at some point will better define that. But the bed and breakfast that we're envisioning is an owner-occupied dwelling in which they're renting a portion of their bedrooms, also offering some common living space for their guests and serving breakfast in the morning. What we're not intending is inns, which are non-owner occupied in our thinking. More like a place where you'd have a hotel manager at the front desk all night, but no one's living there on a permanent basis. And then certainly we all start to know what hotels and motels look like. So those are sort of the categories we're working within.
No,
Yes or no?
yeah, the reason I actually do that because a lot of times we have these terms thrown out there and people think they know what they are and they're not. What they are, and also helps them recognize if this is happening in your neighborhood and everything else. And sometimes it's destructive because you can have folks, just showing up and not being as courteous to their neighbors as others are.
Bill?
The good thing is other towns are pursuing the same avenue. We've been following some of the other towns, so what they do, we will follow, share the resource, and we'll be able to implement the tax.
Great. You want to talk about non-conforming?
Sure, non-conforming, similar to bed and breakfast, we're going to ask that this be sent back to, or we're recommending that this be sent back to the planning board for further study. This bylaw, unlike bed and breakfast, has had a fair amount of commentary and discussion over the last 3 to 4 meetings and 2 to 3 months from members of the public as well as the planning board itself. The planning board is not unanimous in its support or lack of for this bylaw, but the general conclusion among the board is that as submitted, this bylaw is not ready to go forward. In fact, as the drafter of this bylaw, I've actually submitted to the planning board a fairly substantially renovated or revised, bylaw for consideration. So even if we had been coming forward tonight with a recommendation, it more than likely would have been a recommendation full of red pen. After much discussion, the board has concluded that it's not ready for prime time. It does require further study by the planning board, specifically around siting and size of pre-existing non-conforming uses. The premise of the bylaw is, I think, a good one, but certainly there's been several different opinions about that. But the premise of it is that essentially pre-existing non-conforming businesses in the town of Milton or businesses that were at some point allowed a special permit by the Zoning Board of Appeals would be potentially allowed to seek an opportunity to expand its use or change its use. The condition upon that change of use would be made would be that many premises of the business, whether it be their hours of operation, how they handle trash, what their parking requirements are, their green space requirements, their setbacks, their screening of light, all of the type of things you'd like to enforce in a business, especially in a residential district, the planning board would have the opportunity to set conditions upon that use. In exchange, the use would become a special permit use as opposed to a pre-existing non-conforming use. A pre-existing non-conforming use is one which exists by way of having no real zoning right to be there. In most cases, in our town, they are businesses that were in place when the bylaws were put in place in 1938, and they're vestiges of pre-zoning Milton. These are, for the most part, marketplaces like the Milton Market at Brook and Blue Hill Avenue, or Blue Hill Parkway, Tedeschi's on Houston, the Tedeschi's on Reedsdale. There's about 18 to 20 sites that this bylaw, as modified, which you don't even have in front of you, would have contemplated. Again, there's much discussion about if all of those sites should be included, what the conditions upon a special permit should be. But again, those pre-existing sites were basically left in place after the zoning was overlaid. And the result of that is that they can't change their use. If they change their use, there's no mechanism by which they can change their use. There's no zoning that would allow them to have any use other than what's there as a pre-existing use or the underlying zoning. So in the case of Tedeschi's, for instance, if they wanted to do something other than Tedeschi's on Houston Avenue, they would have to create a zoning bylaw that was site-specific and come to town meeting and seek a vote. And the costs and time that is required for that under our current system would be very difficult to achieve for a site that probably won't have more than 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. They can also seek a variance from the ZBA to change their use, but variance law in Massachusetts is very specific. It requires you to be able to prove a hardship, meaning there's no other logical use that you can have there. In some cases, there are other hardships that can deal with geometrical layouts of the site, many different situations, but in this case, it would really be use-driven. And they're not really able to survive appeal. So if you were to be given a variance and an abutter appealed, the Massachusetts courts would almost certainly find for the plaintiff, and your special permit, your variance would be null. So really, the process you're left with is the one that we've seen in Milton quite a bit, which is that we create site-specific zoning, and that has worked reasonably well for sites throughout town. But the real challenge on these sites is that they're just too small to justify that cost and that time that's required. And as a result, many of these sites, as you look at them, are just starting to deteriorate, and they're becoming blight on Milton. And some of them are gateway sites to our town. So we feel that something needs to be done. I think the board agrees that something needs to be done with the sites. It's about how we do it. It's about the conditions that we use to do it. It's about how we bring the neighborhoods into it. And for all of these reasons, we think that we need to have a bit more time to think about this and talk about this. Much like bed and breakfast, we do hope that town meeting will take this opportunity to tell us what they think. We will still give a presentation on this. It will be largely geared around what I'm talking about, which is the process that's involved in trying to get your zoning today to change your use, and whether or not we want to find a way to make that easier for existing small businesses in Milton to expand or at least improve their operations. So that's where we are on this particular bylaw.
Questions?
One more question, if I could go back to the bed and breakfast.
Okay.
Who requested this? Did you have residents that were open to this, or?
This has been something that was this is one of many things, and this non-conforming bylaw and the bed and breakfast bylaw both came from the master plan discussions.
Okay.
The bed and breakfast actually was planning board put out a questionnaire of things you would like to see pre-master plan, and that was the number one thing that came in during the master plan process. Again, it came to the top, and it became one of the top items that was requested.
Thank you.
Others? No? Is there anybody who would have a concern about voting to send this back to the planning board for further study at this time?
No.
If not, there's a recommendation on the screen.
Recommend town votes to refer this subject matter, the matter of this article, back to the planning board for further study.
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Any discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you. Bill, Assisted Living Residence Development.
This is just housekeeping. We have two section Ls in the way our bylaws were, our zoning bylaws were put together. We voted for two Ls. We've got the landscape and we have assisted living. So all this does is take one of those Ls, move it down to P.
Any questions for Bill on that? Does anybody
The most simple.
want to talk about why we don't know where our letters go? Darnell?
I saw a $15,000 increase in your budget to do some work for the planning board, I guess. Is this supposed to clean up this stuff going forward? That's what that is.
All the rest of the letters, too. And all the other letters in the zoning bylaw, get them all.
This actually would be a, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is it's also to look at the bylaws to make sure that they do what they say they do. Some of our bylaws actually, it's very confusing to deal with daily because one part of the bylaw may tell you you can do this, but you read something else in it and it says, no, you can't. So now your same bylaw says two different things, and it's to try to fix some of those issues.
It's the beginning of trying to fix those issues.
We tried this, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, where we took all of the bylaws, we broke them apart, and we said, look, instead of having A, B, C, D in section 3, we'll have section 3, and then since every one of those overlays has its own section, we put it in an appendix. Well, we tried that, it's in the appendix, but the appendix is like this and the bylaws are like this. It's not making it any easier to deal with.
I think, speaking from as a planning board member and the current chair, our goal with the $15,000 is to figure out a way to, this is going to be a multi-prong approach to dealing with the bylaws. I think there's probably, without having had specific discussions, I think most members of the board agree that they're in need of some serious help from an organizational standpoint. So to Bill's point, step one is going through the bylaws and making sure we at least have them in some order to this sort of issue, and have someone get them ready for us for a thorough analysis. The thorough analysis would not be able to be accommodated by $15,000. That's a much larger effort. So this is more of a organizational, get the bylaws in some form that's usable for not only the planning board, but for the poor people that have to figure out what the heck they're allowed to do by reading the bylaws.
Yeah, because I mean, the last guy I know who took this type of undertaking, I think he has a book called the King James Version written out. So, that's about as much.
Yeah, the $15,000 is really meant to start putting these bylaws in an organizational fashion, and probably use a portion of it to identify some macro issues that need to be addressed as part of a larger effort.
Inconsistencies.
Any other questions on this bylaw that's, this amendment that's in front of us? Yeah?
Did you say if this was going to be a new position, or it's by the staff, or contracted out, or?
We're on the different topic, but I assume we can talk about this now. My expectation is that it would be a contract.
Right.
Contracted out.
Since I've been here, the planning department adds every time there's a zoning change, the planning department makes the change to the zoning bylaws and then submits the whole document to the town clerk. It's not supposed to be that way. The town clerk is the keeper of the document, and we're supposed to be able to take that document and give once the change is made here or made at town meeting, it's up to the town clerk to take and input that and then make that change. It doesn't happen, it didn't happen, and what happened is planning department, just because we work with this every day, we had to take and put it in. The problem is that when you take all of the different zoning that's been passed in the last 10 years, and you take every one of those articles and you stick it into a Word document, that Word document starts to stretch. And now the formatting is a nightmare, because how many times in the last 10 years has Microsoft Word changed?
Yeah.
Now take and change the page, or take and put it from one section, put it to another section. Your formatting is a bear. So we've tried several different people, and everybody that does it in a different manner. So that now we have a roadmap, we're going to use it, we're going to lay everything out. It's going to have one specific format to it. It will be easy. We'll be able to go online, look at it, and go to that section, and it'll light up that section. You want the full document? Well, that's fine. That'll take you a little while to download, but it'll be there. It's the individual sections we want to make user-friendly and now. So it shouldn't be that you have, every time I write a new piece of the bylaw, that I have to take and change the big document. The big document shouldn't be like that.
And to emphasize a couple of points, one is a very simple one. Right now, it would be virtually impossible to put our zoning bylaws on our website. So from a customer service and a customer-friendly standpoint, it would be virtually impossible to be able to put it up there because it's not formatted to be read on a piece of paper, never mind the website.
It's there, but it's not.
I understand it. I know it's there,
user-friendly.
but it's not user-friendly.
Can't access it.
Correct. Well, you can access it, but you can't figure out how to
You can't
read
search
it.
something.
Right.
You want to go and search something, you have to hope that,
You know the term you're looking for, and
well, one, the term, and two, that the table of contents actually rolled with it. And sometimes some of those older versions of Word didn't do that.
In my opinion, the bigger problem, to Bill's first point, is that in most situations, the town clerk is the keeper of all of the records, bylaws included. I'm not sure if the town clerk could actually certify our bylaws right now. I don't know, I asked the question, but it would be very difficult for them to know if what they're stamping as the most up-to-date bylaws are actually the most up-to-date bylaws. And I'm not sure if we could even ask them to organize it for them.
What we have is we have them through 2012. What we have after that is, what Sue has done is taken every one of these, every article that gets passed at town meeting gets sent to the Attorney General and gets passed by the Attorney General. She keeps them all in one booklet. So she gives a separate booklet. If somebody comes in and says, I want the bylaws, she'll give them the latest bylaw that she has, plus the addendum. And the addendum has whatever that new section is. It's up to you to take and figure out where that piece goes in that book, if you get it from her.
So as the chair of the planning board, who has to understand these bylaws,
It's tough.
and as a resident and as a developer who, though I don't do any work in Milton, I sympathize with people who might try to, I think I would ask the warrant committee to please help us to start getting this thing into some working order.
Steve has a question.
Wanted to loop back, vote the recommendation.
Thanks.
And then talk about the budget.
Okay. Do you have a motion, Steve?
It's already
It's already
been
been
moved
moved
and
to
seconded.
second.
Did it?
That we were on the discussion part.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
don't
gonna field
remember.
a
Who
little
moved
bit.
it?
I said it.
Okay, and then Betty seconded
Betty
it.
seconded it, and then
I got so involved in the discussion, I
I
forgot.
forgot that.
All right. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, can you change the bylaws?
That is the last
Reflect that, Pete.
bylaw for you guys. Bill, do you want to start talking about your budget now for a few minutes?
Sure.
Maybe the one you sent today?
You asked me a question the other night, and I'm like, I did.
You thought I was wrong again.
No, I didn't. That was a different discussion. No, I went back and looked and tried to figure, what is he talking about? Yes, you're right. I actually put it on Schedule A, and I put it on Schedule E. You put it into Schedule A, and it does, I didn't realize it was carrying over to E, but I also looked at E, and since all of the stuff that's on Schedule A gets repeated on E, and A doesn't say anything, you just put in a number.
So for everybody's information, the budget that you got a week ago from Bill had
double.
this, what?
I asked for double.
Had this one-time item for zoning codification in there twice. So the $15,000 was repeated. It made the budget look too high. So the non-contingent line should only have one new $15,000 request, as it does now.
Right, so instead of, instead of asking for 44, I was asking for 59. Instead of asking for 60 under a non-contingent, I was asking for 90.
90.
So yeah, we were looking for a lot. No.
Make that a little bigger.
The numbers are, under the non-contingent would be 44,869. 29,869 is basically what, that counts,
Do I have the wrong
staff.
version on the screen right now?
That counts our staff salary line. That's our general,
Do I have the right
expenses.
version up right now? What's the salary line, the top line for non-contingent?
27,019.
019?
27,019.
Okay. That's what you have in front of you?
That's,
Yeah, okay.
the 27,019. What is in there is $2,850 in general expenses. Add those two numbers, it's, no, it's not.
Something looks funny. Let's see, E30.
It's 2719.
Yep.
27 and
Let me just look at this one.
2,850 is 2989. 29,869
Plus the 15.
plus 15.
Bill, why does the,
It's messed up because of that line right there. Take, under Schedule E, take out $15,000, the one that you're on right now.
2850.
Oh, I
Take
see.
out that box, take out 15,000, it'll be 2,850.
Oh, I see.
2850.
I'm not catching up to everybody
Line
else.
That one
here.
right
Yeah,
there.
right where you have
Line
the,
16, yeah.
Reduce that by 15,000.
so
Why would I do that?
To take 15,000 out.
that's where you doubled it.
Yes.
Yep, that's
That's where
right.
you doubled
Vision
it.
Oh, you didn't take it out today?
I did.
All right, so I opened the one from yesterday, I guess. Let me look at the email that you sent me earlier today, just to make sure that I have the right one. I thought that I clicked this one.
It's right
Yeah,
there.
it says that it's open, so I think the one that you sent also has the mistake in it. Let me try it again. This is the one that you sent me today.
Yeah, it does.
I think
Still
it's.
has it.
I think the mistake is still there, Bill.
My hard copy doesn't have it, and I printed out.
Let me look at
What I
Schedule
sent.
E for a second, because my recollection was that the original Schedule E that you submitted to me had $15,000 right here for a one-time item,
Yep.
and that was where it was double counting. That was the problem. And then because you also had it up here under zoning codification. So right now, this Schedule E only has it on one time, and then if I look over at Schedule A,
It shouldn't be on Schedule E at all.
because it's right here on 6. Okay. So I'm going to take it off of
Take it out of
Schedule
there.
E.
Now go back to A.
Great. And this one-time item is zoning codification. I'm going to save this to my desktop. What'd you say, Phil?
Spreadsheet by committee.
Okay. Why does this line change now so much? Oh, that was just compared to the contingent. All right. So there was a larger request under the contingent budget, which we're not dealing with now because we voted on Monday to not move forward with the contingent budget, but you didn't have the benefit of coming before us to talk about it before we voted to, well, you had the opportunity, but the budget
The
wasn't here.
$650.
It was an additional $15,000 that the board was requesting in order to start the master plan implementation process. So that was included under your contingent budget, and I just wanted to point that out. It's in your narrative.
I think there's 3 items that went up. One was general expenses went up by $650. And then there was $30,000 15 for the codification and 15 for the master plan implementation.
Yep.
Carried forward to the non-contingent, the 15,000 for codification. We took out the 650, so the expenses stayed at 280.
Okay. Any other further questions about this budget?
I'll give you the reasoning on the 650, why we would want the increase.
Well, you can give us the reason if you want.
You don't have to take it, but chances are you don't have to. It's every time we come to a public hearing, there's a advertising that has to go in. So every one of the articles that we put forth has to be advertised in the paper. Those advertisements come in between $350 and $400. So,
Okay, I can ask you this offline, but warrant committee might want to ask why the applicants don't pay for that.
You can just ask that. Why doesn't the applicant pay for that?
because it was the planning board that brought up B&B.
Okay, I was just asking.
I know
so
that,
it's the
but
planning board. Good.
if this is an article for, the ice house, it does go.
Right, okay. I just
To
wanted
the
you to clarify
applicant.
that to the board.
Well, it's
They
to the
could
public
charge
in
the-
general.
Yeah.
Yes, if it's a citizen petition,
We don't pay.
How does the committee feel about that in terms of kind of being almost like a contractual expense? Because the planning board is required to make those public notices, and so the warrant committee treats contractual expenses slightly differently than we do other expenses that are going
I
up.
need to preface something.
All right.
Because it's a citizen petition, we still pay for it, because it's changing our zoning. It's something that is being brought forth to the board. We possibly could go back and have the applicant pay for it, but we don't. Because it's a zoning article, we wind up paying for it.
Steve?
I don't think it's predictable, but maybe an option would be to look at 3 or 4 years' worth of history of what they are and estimate a number there, and then if it's lower, fine, and if it goes higher, you just come in for a reserve fund, because it's not
Unexpected.
Create a
something you can
baseline.
project.
I mean, if 10 of us around the table, if everybody around the table decided to take and put in their own, we put in a citizen petition, it's 10 citizens that are putting it in.
Right.
It's not like it's a business that's putting in to do bed and breakfast. This is something that the citizens came in. So they went around, they got 10 signatures, and here it is. That's why it didn't go to an entity paying for it. It's coming in as a citizen article versus a planning board of selectmen.
Darnell?
Yeah, no, well, the thing that, what we're talking about here though is like, and the comment is, why wouldn't it be considered contractual? Because we have a special line now for contractual expenses where we pull those outside of your budget so that you're not having to account for those because you have no control over them. That's something.
It would allow the funding in the budget to go up for that item if the cost of it was going up,
Even if we had-
beyond your control.
Yeah, so, and the reason we're trying to figure out here, the problem with that is that it's a non-predictable expense.
That's exactly what this is.
So, what we could do is probably one of the
Not
things.
me. Well, this is what I want Bill to do. I want you to, tomorrow, go please and look at the last 4 years of this expense line and tell me what it was for each of the 4 years. If you've exceeded your $600 budget continually, then we should talk about increasing it.
I have.
Well, can you give me the
No, I
backup
have
for
each of
that?
the last 4 years. I know I have, because as soon as you put in an October town meeting, we added at least a third to that budget line.
Can you give me some data to back
Yes.
it up, and I'll share it with the committee? We're going to talk about the budget on Monday. Yes, Phil?
How would you pay for it in the past? Where have you found the money to pay for those?
Usually at the end of the year, staff changes. There's money left over within that line item.
So 3% transfer.
Yeah, sometimes we don't use all of our expenses for something else, but we're talking hundreds, we're not talking thousands.
Right.
The issue of a special permit or a site plan approval, when it goes to the newspaper, we absolutely do not pay for those. Those go right back to the applicant.
Good.
Right.
We never pay for those.
Brian?
I just want to just very briefly speak to the contingent request. You know, the planning board has spoken a bit about the fact that the town spent, I believe, over $200,000 at the end of the day on a master plan. The planning board or the master plan implementation had its inaugural meeting last night, and that will be a committee that will meet at least monthly to make sure that the various committees and boards around town are doing what they're supposed to be doing to keep that master plan moving and not just sitting on a shelf. It's our expectation as the planning board that as that starts to ramp up, that committee is going to need money to do studies. How those studies will be funded will be up for discussion. It could be funded by neighborhoods, it could be funded by fundraising, it could be funded by developers, but there is an expectation that some of it will be requested from the Warrant Committee as one-time funding and potentially even at some point a line item for an annual cost for master plan implementation. So just wanted to bring that forward because my expectation is that we wanted to ask for it this year. The Master Plan Implementation Committee, in its first meeting, has already made several study requests, and obviously we'll have to talk about how to fund those, whether it's this year or next year, but it's something that should be on this committee's radar going forward. We made a large investment, and I think the town deserves to see it move forward beyond that. And I'm getting corrected, it was $150,000, not $200,000. Thank you, Bill.
25 and
What was the
125.
contingent request for the implementation?
15
15, okay.
as a placeholder. So we'll if we do come back with something next year, the good news is master plan implementation will have been running for a year. We'll have specifics for you.
Any other questions for the planning board? Thanks for coming in, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bill, could you send those numbers to me tomorrow, please? Thank you so much. And if you want to take a look, just make sure that the budget is the way that you want it and send it to me again.
I can remember trying to read the
you.
zoning laws and figure out what they meant.
I have the version you sent out.
And it's correct? So the one that he sent
It wasn't
today at
easy.
6:25 PM
Yeah.
for some reason to his board and copied me on was wrong.
Oh.
He must have attached the wrong one to that.
Okay.
Okay, I want to jump back into the articles for a minute and talk about noise or construction start time. We had an outstanding question on this as to why it excluded landscaping and why the hours were the way that they were. And I have answers. I spoke with our town attorney, and the town attorney couldn't figure it out, and then eventually realized that it was Joe Prondak who actually wrote the first draft of this and said, maybe you should go ask Joe, and Joe had the answer. And the answer why landscaping is excluded is twofold. One is landscaping came up, and they wanted to make sure that outside those hours somebody could come home and mow their lawn after they got home from work and they weren't in trouble. But secondly, they considered that to be completely outside the scope of their work because this is a construction start time article that would address noise from companies that are doing business in the town who have a permit before the Inspectional Services Office. So the Inspectional Services Office therefore has purview to go and speak with that company because they have a current permit and they can do something to mitigate the noise. Throwing landscaping in there would be completely outside the scope of inspectional services doing permitted work. So that's why that's not in there. As for the hours, they debated that, and Sunday is a little more restrictive, going just 10 to 3 as opposed to 8 to 5 on Saturday, because people wanted more rest on Sunday, and they just thought that they should allow for a little later to sleep on Sunday, et cetera, and there was nothing magical to that about church times or anything else. It was just that that they wanted to ramp down and make sure that they had a day that they protected peace and quiet for a few more hours than another day. So more lenient Saturday, a little more restrictive Sunday. Those were the two outstanding questions. There is a recommended recommendation on the screen to vote the bylaw as written. There were no changes made to it that we had, and those were the only two outstanding questions. Is there anything else that folks want to ask or have followed up on before we vote this?
Go back up for a second.
To what? The original?
Yeah, with the fine was the 15.
The fine. Enforcement, maybe? Yeah, here.
Enforcement, yeah.
So it's $50 and $300. the first is a warning. So it's warning 50, 300.
Where do you have to go to say that? Where you go to make your claim? To,
It's here, the bylaw may be by the building commissioner or his or her designee.
okay, all right.
Anything else?
I'll make a recommendation that we vote, which article is that? Is it not numbered
It's
yet?
the construction start time.
The structured sign article as written.
Second.
Thank you, Jean. Any discussion? All those in favor? Yes.
Yeah, I just want-
Michael. Oh, two. Exciting.
No, I'm a huge fan of peace and quiet. It just reminds me that we had this musical noise article that was kicked back to the planning board. It's kind of in limbo, I guess, right now.
Yeah.
Now this is, I did look into this, and some other towns do have comprehensive noise
Mm-hmm.
bylaws. I just wonder if we're gonna pass 500 pages of Word document to talk about every aspect of first musical noise, then construction noise. And
I asked Joe about that a little bit, and he said that from what he's heard, there was so much negative pushback against what Brookline did for leaf blowers, which was really
Right.
voluminous. He just said it's a really hot topic to try to handle right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Lee Michael, in his discussion with Joe, came and told you, this here is enforcement under permit. So if it's enforcement under permit, you kind of throw out leaf blowers, you throw out all the other stuff that wouldn't be permanent use anyway.
But we've been talking about noise in general.
That's
though, yeah.
another,
Yeah.
that's the outcome.
We have to bring that back to the selectmen, I
So
think.
this one here, I think, the way it's written is cut and dry for what its intention is, give teeth to our, our guys to go out there and actually get people to stop abusing their neighbors.
Michael, you look
Yeah,
devastated.
no, well, the thing is like, last year, somebody came over into my neighborhood and they had a vacuuming service. It just created an absolute racket. And it was disturbing. Now, I've done what I can to make, I have double pane replacement acoustic windows in my house now. But, it got through them. So, but I kind of got to get the feel of the community. We're representing people. I don't want to be a one note,
But
very pianissimo note on this thing. But
this article, though, I'm sorry. This
I'm not
article,
necessarily-
no. I'm saying this article wouldn't address that anyway, because again, if somebody has it's a non-permanent service that's causing you your angst.
I'm just taking. I'm done commenting. I'm taking my 1 minute of time to talk about. I kind of want to I want to see more attention to the noise issue, but this is fine with me. So I have no further discussion.
Thank you. I'll also tell you that about the truck idling, I did look that up, and there is a 5-minute limit on truck idling. It's not even 10, unless the idling truck is powering something that's necessary for a business or whatever. And so if they're powering a vacuum, they probably have a way around it. But I did look that up since that was brought up as well. Richard?
Oh, no, I was voting.
Oh, you're ready to vote.
I thought you were just about to ask, so I was quick.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thanks, folks.
What
That's
is
great.
the running the
Steve,
car
the one with the
motor
vacuum
or
over
the
there?
truck motor?
No, it wasn't
under?
Steve.
Is that under construction?
That's
Is
the
that-
noise article.
It's a general Massachusetts state law.
Wow,
Air quality standard.
pardon me?
It's air quality standards.
Oh, thank you.
So about playgrounds, I'm thinking that we can wait on this until Monday if you want when we vote the rest of the budget, but I'm thinking that $125,000 is probably going to be the most that we can help this group out with because there isn't money anywhere else. So my recommendation would be that the town vote no appropriation at this time, but let me know, do you folks want to wait until we vote the budget on Monday and see if there's 5,000 more or whatever? I don't know exactly where the money would go if we did vote it through, but
It seems like there's been a lot of changes, a lot of fluctuation, and we are grabbing money from one place or another and moving it around, and I think I would like to see that
Okay.
before I
Sunday.
recommended this.
Okay. We'll hold that for Monday then, and I need to do this one on Monday as well when we vote the budget on affordable housing. And then you can tell that I was working on the warrant. I just pasted in some warrant language. And then we will, there's one more that we have to vote up here that you asked me to follow up with town council on. I will do that. Get these out of here.
Is that the sales tax?
The bed and breakfast
Yeah.
tax. Okay. All right, a few other things that we have to go over tonight. I want to talk about the budget situation and the article, the email that I sent out. After I sent that out, Ted took a look at it today, and even though Ted is not here in person, he's here in spirit because he had lots of suggestions for us. So I'm going to put up Ted's sheet for a second here on proposed adjustments. Ted was concerned with the amount of money that I had proposed that we take out of law because he said he thought that Anne Marie had correctly identified that that law budget does have some non-aviation related stuff in it that does reoccur every year, and they had to come for the last 2 years in a row to ask for reserve fund transfers. So he said the amount that I had moved out, even though we had discussed it at the meeting, probably was not appropriate. So he suggested putting that back in because we didn't end up needing the money because the general insurance savings came in at $50,000, which was more than he was hoping for. So on the screen right now are slightly amended recommendations from what I had sent out to the full committee, and they reflect Ted's comments, and I'll run down them now and let's talk about them. So the Blue Hills Regional School non-contingent budget request was about $50,000 higher than it's actually coming in. The estimate was $909,984, and as we heard tonight, that's going to stick. So we have about $50,000 there to play with in reduction in fees. We did talk the other day about wanting to fund the schools at about $50,000 above their non-contingent request, which would be our contribution to their full-day kindergarten needs. And I don't have word yet on their vote, but the school committee is supposed to vote tonight on where to come up with that extra $100,000 that they need to match our 50. They know about 70 of it will come from energy. They needed to find the other 30 somewhere. Glenn was pretty sure the other night that he would be able to come up with a good proposal for the school committee tonight, so we're waiting to hear back if that happened. Any questions or discussion on those two lines? Public Works, I had recommended in the sheet based off of Anne Marie's comments the other night on streetlight savings that we reduce that by $30,000 due to the reduction in energy costs expected due to the new contract. I also had taken out $5,000 of these two lines, which Anne Marie said we could do if we needed to, but in the end, the general insurance savings came in at 50. So Ted said, I would really recommend not doing that because we don't know exactly what the effect of the new contract is going to be. This is a big estimate. We're taking out a huge chunk of DPW anyway, and maybe it might be better to let 1 year go by and see if those $5,000 in savings actually happen and let that flow to free cash the first year. So we could be a little more aggressive and take out that $10,000 if we wanted to, but Ted wanted me to share with you his concerns about cutting those budgets back too much. Do you have an announcement? No. Then there's the law. I had reduced that a little bit further than he had already recommended reducing it in the one-time funds, and so in this round of proposed adjustments, he took that out. The fire, which we had discussed in terms of overtime, the recommendation here is to increase above the non-contingent request fire overtime by $75,000, and that money would come from a combination of the Public Works streetlight reduction and also the general insurance savings, which is $50,000, which is on the next line. Questions about those lines? All told, that would leave us with a remaining balance of almost $5,000 to do something with, and Ted recommended, I guess, splitting it up between two different things. I don't know why Ted's sheet goes down to 3,000 and up to 8,000. D13 plus D16. Oh, I'm sorry.
So then-
Yeah, it's two numbers to add together. So there's $5,000 left over from the adjustments up above. And then the overlay reserve, this is something that I hadn't done on the sheet that I sent you, but Ted recommends we do. The overlay reserve to be much more exact about the overage above what we usually count as continuing funds used for operations versus free cash. He says we actually could take out another $3,669 to use for reoccurring operations because the overlay reserve came in where it did. So if we were to take that $3,669, we would have a total of $8,635. And he said we could decide what to do with that, but his suggestion was maybe to put it into stabilization funds to zero out the changes there. So
I'm confused by that. That's in addition to the 60,000?
which 60?
The overlay reserve
It was 60.
was $60,000 total in additional funds.
It was
I'm showing 30.
it was really 64. So it was $160,000 was what we had planned on the overlay reserve returning
Right,
to
and
us.
it came in at 221,371.
Right. So the difference. let me see.
61,040.
What was the number?
61.
No, it came in at 221.
371.
371. So a difference of $61,040, and I guess the let me see here. It has to do with the amount that we can recognize in terms of operating versus what is free cash, and I guess anything above 164 should be considered one-time funds, not free cash. Anything above 164. We had set our target at 160,331 for fiscal year 17 because that's what we got back last year. But he said really we had decreased our estimate because if you look back at the prior couple of years, we had been realizing 164. So we actually lowballed it by $3,669. And he said, since we're above our running multi-year estimate, we should really go back to 164 and realize that $3,669 the way we would have before the last year's anomaly happened of it going down a
with
little
the
bit.
balance of the money, we're going to do what with?
So the balance of the money, if there are no further questions on this, then we can definitely come back to this, but the balance of the money shows up now on the one-time sheet, and the overlay release excess is here, $57,371.
Okay.
And it's currently tabulated on our free cash tab. So I was going to run down now what the recommendation is for things to do with the free cash. But let me jump back to that other tab for just a minute. Is there anything on here that folks have any concerns about? My goal is that we can kind of come to consensus tonight that this is the direction that we're going in. Julia and I have made really, really good progress on the warrant, so I might actually be able to send it out Friday night-ish for people to look at over the weekend. My cover report won't be in there, and there's a few things on like water and sewer that aren't done yet, but most of the rest of it is actually getting there quite a bit. So if we can come to agreement on what we want to do sort of conceptually on these adjustments and also the one-time money, I could work to put that in over the next 2 days, and then you guys could review it over the weekend, and we could vote from the warrant on Monday. That's what I'm hoping. But if there's more discussion that's necessary, that's fine. So is there anything on here that folks find controversial or have any concerns about?
So
It's
we spoke
essentially
about-
what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me flip over to the one-time funds then. So on the one-time funds, at the top of the list here, coming off of non-contingent, we have sick leave buyback for selectmen, treasurer, library, and board of health. And then we also have the law, the $49,000 that's intended for the airplane noise. So this was part of the initial non-contingent law budget. $49,000 is the amount that they earmarked for airplane noise, and the thought here was that we don't know that this cost is going to reoccur, so why not just fund it for 1 year with one-time cash and then let them come back again another year. I also put on here for now, for our discussion, $15,000 to satisfy the planning board's request for zoning codification, because it kind of sounded like a good idea to me, and I wanted to have it in those numbers if you guys were interested in that. And then the affordable housing request at $20,000. So let's discuss those last two lines because we haven't discussed them before. Yes, Darnell?
The affordable housing request, that came through Hurley? That was one of the Hurley?
It really came from Katie because
Katie.
they're both.
No, but he does, I know.
Yeah, he's on the
That's
board,
really-
but Katie wrote it, and
Okay.
yes, yeah, we talked about it the other night.
What does it
Yeah.
represent?
So the Affordable Housing Trust is something that can be built up a number of different ways. Most communities use the Community Preservation Act, which Milton voted down, so we don't have that ability, that funding mechanism available to us. A lot of communities also use fees from developers who are developing larger properties in the town, like say Hendry's. If we had this mechanism in place at the time that we were negotiating with the developer, we could have said, okay, you're going to put in X number of affordable units. We'd also like you to make a contribution of X dollars to the Affordable Housing Trust when you're building this, or have that in your proposal or whatever. So you can write that into your process so that you have a regular way of funding the Affordable Housing Trust. We don't have that yet. I suggested it in the warrant last year when I wrote this comment. And I know the planning board is talking about that, and I know from talking to Katie the other night that the Board of Selectmen is talking about that. So what we did last year, I think, was $5,000, and we just did sort of a nominal contribution because we were also operating pretty close to non-contingent last year. And we wanted to say, yes, Affordable Housing Trust is important to us, here's $5,000. This year, the Board of Selectmen wanted to ramp it up a little bit. And so the best Ted could come up with at the time when he put this estimate in there was $20,000, and I haven't changed it since then. So what the money would do is it could be used for lots and lots of different things. Tom Hurley was talking about the possibility of using a plot of land that's not used right now and trying to have Habitat for Humanity build 2 affordable units on it, and then they would sell those at affordable prices or rent them out. You can also use it to fund various projects in the town, do a lot of education with the money. There's many, many things, and actually I wrote a lot of them in the comment last year in the warrant if you wanted to see that. But right now there's just $5,000 in there. Darnell?
Yeah, no, that's a good, I'm really in for this because what it does is it takes, we always talk about the town wants to look like it's doing something. We have to prove we're doing something when we go in front of like a 40B proposal, go in front of these different things saying, well, what is the town of Milton actually doing? This is a first step or a good step in showing like, you know, we're actually trying to put something aside. We're trying to write regulations in to offset some of those threats.
This would still be token, though.
It's like, sometimes all you have is token.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes token is better than nothing. But I'm saying this is by far way underfunded because I remember we had the discussions when we were actually going out trying to pass the Preservation Acts and stuff. Some of the ideas that came out was that actually get this fund big enough, you can actually offer developers deals to come in and help them with financing to build affordable housing in the town. So there was things like that and ideas that went to the wayside with the defeat of that. But this is something I think we should definitely look at and start moving
I just want to remind people that
this money is nothing compared
that the money is nothing, but we did get chastised a little bit from one of the town meeting members who came to the microphone and said that they couldn't believe that we only put $5,000 into it, and we called it a modest contribution. And the comment was, this is nowhere near a modest contribution. $5,000 isn't going to do anything, but I wanted to remind people that happened. Was it Richard first? Betty, sorry.
Okay, I was wondering, in the contingent budget request, did the Board of Selectmen make a recommendation?
They never
or
did. They
no?
never did in writing. And when they came before us at the high school, I asked them what they considered to be an in the ballpark contribution, and they quietly said, "Well, I don't know, $500,000." And I almost died on the spot. Maybe that's what caused the pneumonia. But if we're in a non-contingent, there's no possibility to do anything like that. And I couldn't even actually imagine where we were struggling with $700,000 for roads that are crumbling, how we would put $500,000 into a override request. But that was the number that was set.
So how did it get down to 20?
That wasn't them. It was Ted. Ted just pulled a number out of nowhere
Okay,
for us to talk about.
okay.
Richard?
Yeah, not that it even matters because the money's so small, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. For example, when you say like they could go and do like a Habitat for Humanity, build on a plot of land that's not being used. That just helps fund that, but that still goes through the normal process of town meeting approving those individual projects, right?
Does anybody know how the Affordable Housing Trust spends their money? Once we put money into it, can the board release it? Or the, what do you call it? The trustees? Can the trustees release it, or does town meeting release it?
Yeah.
They could probably release it, but they couldn't, like,
It
zoning
doesn't-
articles
It
would have to
doesn't
be
go
created.
around, it doesn't
Right.
go around building
There's no
code,
zoning
building
changes.
law or anything,
It's
no.
always zone, you know.
Right.
It's a funding mechanism to educate folks on affordable housing and also to create opportunities for people who need affordable housing. But there's unlimited types of things they can do, but only if they have money. But it doesn't release them from any other code that we have, or zoning, or bylaws.
It also makes a great place to park funds if you start to come up with ideas on ways to fund this thing. So if you go up and have someone coming in and they're gonna do a building and they say, hey, in lieu of adding another affordable unit here, make a contribution, now you have some place to put that contribution.
Yeah.
So you can actually, you know what I'm saying?
We've created a bank
Create-
account that we can
create
use
an
in the future.
account
But
that you can
sometimes
actually
a
use.
developer will say, we just can't possibly make another affordable unit fit in this building the way that it's designed.
Right, no, I just have one follow-up question. I would hope that, that they would use it though, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're not gonna use it, I mean, if the schools are looking for 30,000 more to fund full-day kindergarten, I'd rather see it get used than being parked for a year. So I would hope they're gonna use these funds.
He's talking about parking developers' money.
Developers'
who are
money.
willing to
Okay.
make-
No, no, no.
not
They're
the
planning on
tax-
using this.
Not the tax money, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
Should see it the next year, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know what they're planning to use it for.
Tom rattled off a bunch of things. He said we have tons of ideas, but no money. Okay.
So the
Our
point
folks-
being, it will be used.
Hopefully, yeah.
I think they should, like, I think they should say something to that effect, because, you know, if he said that we need $500,000 to do anything, does that mean $20,000 does nothing? And if it's nothing, 20,000 could go along a lot further somewhere else. Again, it's a small amount of money, but it does go further in some areas.
It also then takes the visibility away from a place to, you know, a place to eventually start something important. And I'm afraid of taking lines out, you know?
I'm not, I wholeheartedly agree with you, but, again, I'm just harping on
Yeah,
one
yeah.
topic, but full-day kindergarten, what are we, the last of 8 towns in the entire state to do it? I mean, I'd rather see that happen than park 20,000 just because.
I can confirm that the school committee voted on full-day kindergarten,
Yeah,
and they
that's
came
gonna
up with a
happen.
fund.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah, no.
They,
'Cause
I just got a text.
Full-day kindergarten, they gotta do it. We came up with
Yes.
another 50, we already you came up with 950, then another 50, they gotta do it.
I get it,
Especially
but I could say the same thing about the airplane noise. You know, was $49,000 enough, or did it need a little bit more? I'm just saying,
No,
$20,000 is a lot of money to put in an account if you don't know if they're gonna use it.
Yeah.
I'm saying, need it.
Need it and are gonna use it are two different things.
No. I'm saying, you have to, at some point,
Put money towards
you
something.
have to put money towards other things other than just, you know, saying, okay, we'll do that someday. You know what I'm saying?
It's not, no.
No,
Not what I'm saying.
No, I'm saying, you gotta do that. But with the schools and the full-day kindergarten, the school stepped up, we stepped up. I think that's baked. I think we're good.
But you're correct. There's lots of places for us to be
There's
spending money.
a ton of places, and like, again, if it's $500,000, we'll just get you going, then in next year you put a few $100,000 into it, that 20 did nothing but sit there when you could have used it for something else. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that.
One
we should
example
know.
is we could make that 10,000, and we could spend 10,000 on reclaiming our records upstairs, and we could
Sure.
advance that 10-year process. You know, there's
Because there's
a
the
lot
things
of
we said no
different
to,
things.
right?
So is there any way of buttoning that down?
Yes, Katie had said if full-day kindergarten were at risk, we might want to consider bringing the number down a little bit. But
I meant
The
in
way-
terms of giving.
projects.
What are they gonna spend
Projects, what's gonna
$20,000
be
on?
Oh, Tom rattled off like hundreds of thousands of dollar limit projects. He didn't rattle off ones that would cost like $20,000 or $30,000.
So that, I mean, that goes right to Rich's point.
So his goal was to build it up over time, you know.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. But, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars building it up 5 or 20 at a time. It's gonna take a mighty
5
long
years?
time to get anywhere.
Oh, the developer might.
Well, maybe they're hoping that when we do an override, we'll put. I mean,
Yeah.
they said the number $500,000. So
I'm feeling Rich's discomfort
Right.
in approving 20,000 for this without having any idea what they're gonna use it for.
okay, I can ask Tom to give us some ideas on what they would do with 20,000 or why it's helpful. Does anybody have any ideas of someplace else they would rather use some of this money? Like, I would really like something to go to the Affordable Housing Trust. So maybe keep it to at least 5, which we did last year, or double it to 10 or something. But what would you do with some of this money if you were to move it out?
What's the reserve fund at now?
500 and, well, I mean, it's got Hendry's in there, so I don't know what the amount of Hendry's is that we're actually holding.
300,000.
Was it 350? 350 for
Did
Hendry's?
they boost it up? I thought it was 300. But
550. I think it's just over
I
200,000.
wrote that down.
It's free.
That we were gonna find last week.
Yeah. This is the school one. This is the one I think you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Any other comments or ideas of things that we want to say it again?
If we wanna take a real long-term look, OPEB.
Say it again.
The long game.
OPEB?
OPEB. Okay.
That's the long game.
Jeez, what do you, you know, it's like,
No, I
we said
think
okay
we've,
to all these things. We were talking
I
about the
think
contingent
we've, I
budget.
think
Yeah.
we've solidified most of these numbers, and they do have a purpose, and we trimmed them and built them up and rethought them, and I think until we have something concrete, we should just leave it alone.
Yeah, I'll leave the 20.
Let me get some response from Tom,
Yeah,
and we'll discuss it again on Monday. If I get the response from him before then, obviously, I'll email it out to you. And then let's talk about planning board. So I threw in the $15,000 one-time request here from the planning board for zoning codification. How do people feel about this? It's the first step in a
Yes.
multi-step process, obviously,
And it's a common complaint of how bad.
from me.
Others are trying to work your way through, or even find an up-to-date copy, and I think, having an updated, or, real-time copies of the town's rules available to the town's residents is something that we should.
seems like we make a lot of mistakes because
Yeah.
that's incorrect. Spend a lot of time revoting articles and housekeeping, and
Was that enough money?
I think
Had a
it should be
special
done.
town meeting because
Yeah.
of it, so there's the
Yeah.
cost right there.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
And the contingent numbers.
Oh, no, I don't need them to come. Thank you. I agree.
Yeah, so I would leave it. And I feel the same way about that as documenting our records that,
Maintaining the records.
yeah, I think that those things need to be done.
Okay. Other comments on the planning board, 15,000 for zoning codification? Any concerns about keeping it in there?
I think the only concern I have is that we don't know it's just like with the town clerk.
Yeah.
We put in a certain amount of money, we don't really know what we're getting for that.
We don't have an exact quote that would show the services, but I did press Bill on it a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and I asked, and he said that he did call some of his colleagues in other towns who have the same
Oh,
position,
okay, great.
who have done something similar, and that's where he got the 15,000. It's like step 1 of the process would cost approximately 15,000,
Good, okay.
which is the reordering and putting it in a new file.
And he would have to go out to bid for
Yeah.
a contract.
He had to get 3 bids or whatever. Yeah. I'm not hearing significant concern or pushback. Okay.
No.
I'm going to make it not yellow then. Okay. So then we have $950,000 for free full-day kindergarten.
Mhm.
Anybody want to make a last stand to try to get this out of the...
50?
What'd you
Didn't
say?
we make that, we moved that up? 950 and then we added 50?
The other 50 is operating funds.
Oh, okay.
So this
Cool.
is the one-time use of one-time funds.
Okay,
the other
cool.
50. That's why we couldn't just like move it from the affordable to, because the affordable's one-time funds, and we needed the 150 to be operating. Okay, I'm gonna move on from there then. All right, so that would bring our total, once we remove those things, down to, the total of all those charges is 1.1 million. Our free cash was 2.14 million. You add to that the overlay release excess of 57,000, and now our available balance is $1,080,234. The capital not bonded CIPC recommendation was $758,250. And if we fund that whole thing, the available cash would be $321,984, and the suggested breakdown there is for the OPEB trust and the stabilization fund, putting $153,276 in, which is 1/6 of 1% of property taxes, which is our kind of target number. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's just a target that's suggested that we meet. And then the stabilization fund would get the remaining, which is $168,708 plus $8,635 from recurrent, which would bring our balance of one-time funds to zero. Questions, concerns about the sheet below full-day kindergarten?
Just out of curiosity,
Get those
how big
numbers.
is the stabilization fund right now?
I think we
probably
have
could
to look
find
it
that
up.
somewhere in
I don't
So
know
one
off
of
the
these
top of my
pieces of
head.
paper.
You could find it in there.
If Ted were here, he'd be able to tell you immediately. I'm just not there yet.
I think it's between 3.5 and 4, but I'm not sure. I'll check.
High threes, yeah, I think.
I'll look it up for you.
What is it trying to get to?
Yeah.
500 million? I don't know.
No, no.
Is it 5% of your
5%
budget?
of
Your
your
operating
budget,
budget.
So 5% of
100 million is
110.
5 million.
And by the time we get there, it'll be 120.
It'll be up, yeah.
Want to just call Ted?
Sure.
No, I
No,
don't.
no.
I want to leave the poor man alone. Is that you're just asking,
Just
or
asking
are
out of
you
curiosity.
concerned that this contribution is too high?
No, I was
Okay.
concerned what would be the appropriate,
Right.
is this our target or is this just what's left over?
It's what's left over, but we could look and see what we put into it last year. The stabilization fund got.
Low last year.
Oops, what'd you say?
Yeah, we went low last year on it.
I think we did 0 last year,
Yeah,
actually.
that's what I'm saying, because we had to.
Yeah, we had to skip it last
An
year
override
because
this year.
we didn't have enough money. So we put 0 into it last year, and we said we would come back to funding it this year.
I guess you should look at, okay, so.
Do we have, for the capital expenditures, do we have a list of that stuff right now? Or no? Do you have a list on?
Yeah,
I want to see what that is.
we had discussed that before. I hope that I sent it out. Julia didn't have a copy of it either. Let me put it in. So maybe I'll just forward it out to everyone. Capital. Just sent it out. Okay, so the Capital Committee is meeting on Friday morning, and the Capital Committee is going to relook at this request which they have submitted to us, because this request includes surface drains at $300,000, and that $300,000 will now be in the stormwater fund. So instead of just reducing their request by $300,000, they're going to look at requesting $300,000 for something else, especially since we've already earmarked this amount in our one-time funds. There are 2 possibilities for how that $300,000 might be used that have already been floated, and maybe there are other ideas too, but so far I've heard roads and roofs.
For the DPW yard?
I don't know
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that, yeah.
The roof, one of the
Well,
buildings?
those were the general areas of topic, and then the purpose of Friday is to get into some more specifics, because folks wanted, the departments that are on the committee as well, they wanted to go back and
Oh, they have
check
some,
and see
okay.
what's what.
Yeah.
Well, we're voting on Monday. Let them know. So the top of the sheet is the recommended bonded capital items, which amount to $2,063,000. They include a dump truck, $400,000 for roads, heating hot water system upgrades, a new fire truck at $500,000, the playground equipment improvements that we mentioned earlier at $125,000, phone system upgrade at the schools, and an upgrade to the wireless infrastructure at the schools. The bottom of the sheet are the total recommended non-bonded capital items, and the total there is $758,000. For the first five-ish, would you say?
No, I'm just looking.
For the first five-ish, it's the schools, building repairs, security system at Glover, security cameras, Brooksfield, track repairs, the high school parking lot drainage upgrades, and then DPW, paving roller, and I don't know what Urban Forest 20 is.
Trees.
New trees. The town paving and curbing repairs and kitchen equipment. At the schools, library, and town, computer replacements at all of those locations. And then server hardware and department weapons for the town. And then a 1-ton dump truck, which actually seems really inexpensive. That must be used or something. A 1-ton dump truck for $38,000. Or maybe they have money in their budget or something.
No, that's about right. It's 40 grand.
No bells or whistles.
Okay. Good deal then. And then the town clerk, that $15,000 for the preservation of permanent records. And so because we went with a non-contingent budget, they didn't end up getting that second year in their request. So we'll only be funding, if we vote through the capital items the way they get amended on Monday, we'll only be funding that for the first year.
The records?
Records preservation. Folks might recall that it was on contingent and in capital, and now it's only in capital. So it'll just be 1 year.
What are department weapons?
That's
I think they're
the
for the
police department weapons.
Okay.
We asked about that, if they could phase it, and
Okay.
apparently that's a giant problem because they get trained and certified on a particular weapon, and if different officers have different kinds of weapons, it's an issue. So they replaced them all, and they were last replaced several years ago, and they get, they train on them regularly, so they get a good working out, I guess. I think he said there was some trade-in value on them too.
Oh, that's right. I remember that, yeah.
Any questions on the proposed CIPC recommendations? All right, well, I hope that we're able to get an update from them sooner rather than later, but we could, if as long as that request comes in at exactly the same amount, then we could probably vote, as long as we don't find their replaced line item to be controversial, but this looks like a pretty trustworthy group of people. So I will work with the number that we have right now, and I'll update the warrant over the next couple of days, and I'll try to get that out to folks in a draft copy so that you can review it and we can start voting the budget on Monday. So to talk about the schedule a little bit, I am hopeful that we will get through voting the budget articles on Monday, and voting the the last two articles that we had in there on affordable housing trust, and the other one that I had a question on for Tom, for legal, I mean to say. And I think that that's the majority of the votes that I need for the warrant to be final. I'll then send it out to bunches of people in town. Amy Dexter has to review it, to review all the numbers and everything. The Board of Selectmen take a look at it. And so that will give folks, if I'm able to send it out early next week, it'll give them a week to sit with it and work with it and look at it before we have to send it off to the printer. So I need to reassess on Tuesday probably whether or not we need to meet again next week. If we do need to meet again next week, I want to survey people who is available to meet on Thursday night. 1, 2, 3. Not you.
Not me.
Not you. Not you. So we probably won't have a meeting on
What
Thursday
day?
night then.
Thursday?
Next Thursday.
Yeah.
Then we would probably meet the following Monday, and that's when we would have to finish everything.
When you say you're gonna send the warrant out, are we gonna get them?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's going to be in a draft version,
Okay.
but I'll try to send it by Friday
Okay, good.
so that you can look at it over the weekend
Send me
for
that
Monday
email.
night.
I didn't get it. The email you sent me, I didn't get it.
That is our target, but we have a little bit of wiggle room, just a little bit. I don't want to open my calendar because it takes forever, but yes. We're going to get there not too long after that. We have to, or else it won't get out there. But we are very pressed for time, but we're close. I would say that the reason why I need to reassess on Tuesday where we're going to be, quite honestly, is because I'm new to writing the warrant, and I have a bunch of questions that I need to go through with Ted in terms of where certain information comes from and how long it will take to get that information. So I need to work through that before I have a better handle on just how long it will take to put the finishing touch on that.
Yeah, give it Amy.
Yeah, I
Amy,
need Amy's
the
help
life.
on lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And you've been working hard, Julia, tracking down all sorts of tables and numbers and everything and inputting data, so thank you very much. It's coming along nicely, but it is a long document, and I intend to give folks a week at least to look at it and recommend any changes. There are a lot of comments in there that need to be written. I was going to try to make the Herculean effort of taking last year's comments, using the numbers that I know and what I have. I was going to try to take a first draft at making comments and then sending them out to people for assistance. If there's anybody who is a subcommittee chairperson or on a subcommittee and knows that you want to write a comment either for an article or for a budget line item, I'd be happy to accept that assistance, but I'm not going to force it on anybody.
I would,
I was planning on doing comments.
yeah.
So you want to tell me what you want to do?
Well,
You want to do the library?
yes, and in fact, he has written up his recommendations so well, you could almost use the library.
Okay.
I'll look at it.
All right.
But it was so close to what we recommended,
Okay.
except I think for a couple of positions.
So today being Wednesday, when do you think you could get me something?
What's tomorrow?
Thursday?
Patty's Day,
And then
get
Friday.
more whiskey.
And you need them by when?
Well, Monday, really. But
Okay.
I'm going to send something out to the committee over the weekend. So if you were to get me something, say like by Saturday or
Oh,
something.
yeah, I
then,
can do that by Saturday.
Okay, then I could put that in, and then other folks could see it.
Yeah,
before
and I can
Monday.
do the town.
Looks like it's
I
gonna
did the
start at
town.
4.
What do you mean by the town?
It's 43.
You mean town government
Yeah.
budget?
Yeah.
It says 41 degrees. That's awesome.
That would be great.
Do you want to do it? Are you?
Yeah, 'cause, well, we're gonna do them both, break
Somebody
them
said
up.
he's
So I'm gonna do
12.
the IT, so whatever we need for IT.
Or
and we'll-
electrician,
And then,
elections and.
elections and stuff, so. we'll do it
IT and elections?
Yeah. So
Okay.
We work with,
So is Saturday good for you too?
yeah.
Can you do
we'll
something?
work it.
Betty, you're going to do schools? Anything else? No, that's good enough. Okay. My load actually lightened quite a bit when we recommended to send those planning board things back to the planning
Yeah.
board because I was going to have to write some big comments on that. So that's why I kind of felt comfortable trying to take a first stab at a bunch of things. But is there anything else? Public safety? Do you want to take? You want me to do it?
I can help. I didn't go to the.
Yeah. All right. I'll do the first draft on it.
All right.
Anything else?
Michael, if I do the library.
You'll do Public
you
Works?
went to
That would
the
be
library.
awesome.
Went to the library, I went to the school, I'm trying to think of what,
So if I write
Well, I
one,
must
send it
tell you,
over to you?
Ted rewrote a
Oh,
lot
Ted
of my
wrote-
stuff last year.
Ted and I are different in a lot of ways.
Ted rewrote all of mine.
Okay.
23 years ago.
Well, that's a nice
library.
contribution.
Yeah.
It's a typical.
I found out when I read the warrant, I said, wow, I wrote pretty good.
I don't remember writing that.
I don't remember writing that. That's pretty
The other
good.
night, Jonathan empowered me to write a strongly worded introduction and report to the warrant. So you guys might have to pull me back once you see
Nice.
my first version.
You can
No,
make it
it's-
softer and gentler. if necessary.
So I'm going to see you guys on Monday, and then probably the Monday thereafter. And if we need to have that meeting the Monday thereafter, the budget, the warrant needs to go to the printer immediately. So that's just going to be to revote some final things before we send the budget off. But there's probably going to be some email traffic between those two Monday meetings. And Ted's away and I'm away, so sorry we can't run the meeting on Wednesday. Anything else? Yes, Bill?
Just for members' information, the stabilization fund is now north of 4 million as of fiscal year 2015.
Wow.
So it doesn't include whatever our contribution was last year.
We had none.
We had 0 last year, but
All
4
right, so
million.
it's
million?
missing a year's worth of interest is all it is.
Okay. Great, that's nice.
Yeah.
It would be good to have some explanation on the OPEB, the outstanding, because the last time I think anyone explained it was Gene Wilson. a couple of years ago, who went through it and showed how a dollar invested now took a bunch of, you know, it was a multiplier down the line somewhere, and I just, you know, it was a big number that's out there that's an obligation, and
It's 115
many
million
years
at that
away.
time.
Yeah, so, you know, if a few dollars takes away a few $100 down the line, maybe, you know, camping a little bit more from.
Do you think that's an Amy thing, or is there somebody else that I
I
should
have
talk
no
to?
idea who, you know, like I said, when, the last time I heard anybody talk about it, it was Jean, who just, she's an
She was an
actuarial.
actuarial, yes.
So
She
she
knew
just
exactly
figured it
how to
all
figure
out,
it
but
out.
somebody's gotta have figured out what the obligation is, how we
Yeah.
got there, and what the.
All right, I'll look into it.
I think that's a good point, because one of the reasons I wanted to find out what the stabilization fund is, there's no time constraint on building that stabilization fund.
Right.
And there's no penalty in terms of not down paying a big budget item or a big bill you're gonna have. Well, with OPEB, there is. So, you know, it might, on a yearly basis, make more sense to take 50 or 60 that you would normally put into stabilization and put it into OPEB instead,
Yeah.
because you're paying down a future debt and you're shortening the time it takes you to do that. It's not like we're starting at zero with the stabilization fund. We've
Right.
already got a
Yeah.
fairly good balance in there.
Okay, I'll try to do some research on that the next couple of days, and if we wanted to make a change to that on Monday, it wouldn't be that hard to make that change on the fly.
Cool.
Anything else before we adjourn? Indeed.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? See you Monday.
You get dessert now, 10 o'clock.